Hampton recovered from an attempt to end her life and the resulting brain injury to become an inspirational and educational writer. She has written for the Huffington Post, Posit Science, Mind Body Green, and other well-known clients. On her website, The Best Brain Possible, she shares information and inspiration on how you can better your brain and life. Debbie is the author of 3 books. Her latest, How to Use Mindfulness as a Mental Health Tool to Beat Depression and Anxiety and Change Your Brain, tells you in plain English, backed by the most current science, exactly what mindfulness is, how it physically changes your brain, and the simple ways you can take to put it to good use in your own life to improve your brain and mental health. Please join me on this episode of Two Healing Minds when I speak to Debbie Hampton. Hi, Debbie. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Tanya. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, to get started, you've shared that when you were in a coma after a suicide attempt, and you've shared about your experience in your book, How to Beat Depression and Anxiety. So I just wanted to know that how long did it take for you to see that this experience that others may consider tragic was actually an opportunity for you to heal and transform?
I would say the actual switch in my thinking took years, and it was a process of me emotionally healing and maturing. But the catalyst for that happened probably 6 to 8 months after I attempted to end my life. I fully had plans to try to end my life again after the first attempt because I had not made things better. I'd made them much, much worse. I was severely brain injured. My children were taken away by their father, and who very quickly moved to a different state with them. And I mean, and I thought things were bad before. I had made them much worse. So I attempted to end my life in May. So in I think it was January of the following year, or maybe it was the fall, I'm not real sure. My older brother and he invited me to go to Hawaii. And I think he just knew that I needed something positive and something to look forward to. And I would certainly be scared to go on my own because I was brain injured, couldn't really speak, didn't have a full cognitive capacity, but I felt safe with him. And so we get to Hawaii, and the very first day we're scuba diving, or not scuba diving, snorkeling and swimming around this little bay that looked like it was something out of a postcard. I mean, black sand beaches, palm trees, and azure blue water. And I used to be a really good swimmer. I was a lifeguard all through high school and college growing up, and a competitive swimmer in my early years. So I was a really good swimmer before the brain injury. After the brain injury, I did not have the physical coordination to really swim. I couldn't even coordinate with the snorkel. I couldn't coordinate the breathing through the tube, and I kept taking in big gulps of water. But I eventually got the hang of it, and I was kind of snorkeling around this little bay, oohing and awing at the fish and the life under the water. And unbeknownst to me, I kind of went out to the mouth of the bay, and where it joined the ocean, the current was much stronger, and the waves were really powerful coming in and out. And I kicked off my fin. I had fins and a snorkel, which made me a really powerful swimmer. But I kicked off one of my fins on a coral rock underneath the surface. And without my fin, I was not nearly a good swimmer. I was having trouble keeping my head above water, and I would
Mhm.
sink and then go back up and yell, help, and sink back down and come back up. And I saw this rock not too far from me, and I swam to it, but it was a coral rock, and it sliced, like cut open my feet and my hands,
Oh.
as coral does. So then I happened to spot the sailboat bobbing in the middle of the bay. And having been a good swimmer, and because the curl was cutting my hands and feet, I thought, well, that looks more attractive than staying here. So I started swimming to the boat, and my poor brother came back and saw me go off the rock and was
Mhm.
like going, panicking and yelling. And finally, I think he spotted me swimming. But I made it to the boat and I hung over the side of it, bleeding, yelling, help, help. And this very scruffy looking guy came
Mhm.
above deck and looked at me like he didn't know if he was imagining what was happening or what. But he was very nice. He pulled me over the side and put like a little canoe kind of rowboat in the water and rowed me to shore to where my brother was very anxiously waiting. Well, needless to say, I did not go snorkeling again the whole trip. And it wasn't until we got home and I'd been home a while that it occurred to me. I thought, okay, about 8 months ago, I tried to end my life. And here was the opportunity to end my life. And I fought really hard to live. Why did I do that? I could have just slipped under the water and finished what I'd started. And maybe not even have had all the stigma attached to it. But I realized from that experience that I wanted to live and that all the chatter in my head was separate from who I was. The authentic me, my spirit, wanted to live, wanted to thrive, wanted to be happy. It was all that talk in my head that was convincing me life was horrible, that I was horrible, that it wasn't worth living, that I wasn't worth living. And so that from that point on, I decided I wanted to live and I started acting like it. I
Mhm.
I found out everything I could about how to rehabilitate my brain and my body and started doing it. And I also sought out help from counselors, therapists. I mean, I really threw myself into recovering full time and I saw results. And the more results I saw, the more I did, and the more I learned. And the more I learned, the better I got. So here I am. But
Yeah, that is such an interesting story that after your suicide attempt and being in a coma, it took another potentially dangerous situation, your snorkeling accident, to give you some more guidance or a better perspective of like, you've survived once. You've survived a really hard event, which is the suicide attempt going through God. And that took a lot of survival skills and power. So this kind of just reminded you in a way, right? Of that, hey, you know what? I'm here to live. I went through some hard events. I'm not going to let this one take me down. I'm going to work harder.
after the initial attempt in
Right.
my life, I was actually mad at my
Mhm.
parents for keeping me alive because I mean they had to resuscitate me, and I mean I probably could have slipped over to the other side if people had not fought to keep me alive. And I mean, I was actually mad because I thought, what right do they have to decide that for me? So just because I survived the attempt didn't change my thinking or my reasoning or my will to live. It took the near death experience to make me realize I did want to live. And I don't want to speak for others, but I think that's probably true for a lot of people that try to end their lives is they just want a path forward and they want to feel like they want to live and not be
Absolutely.
overwhelmed by current circumstances. So, one of the most um, influential sayings that I have now, which I wish that I take to heart then, was whatever you're feeling, whatever circumstances you're in, are for now. They're not forever. And you won't always feel this way.
Yeah, that's a good perspective to have. And you wrote a book about this. Your book titled "Beat Depression and Anxiety." You discuss something that you discussed, which is really important, is reactive behavior. Because I find that if you're severely depressed, most people have overly reactive behavior. And that's why you're depressed in the first place. You get into those negative emotional spirals. So, what do you suggest are some practical strategies or mind shifts that people can use to move from a reactive mode to more mindful? I know you explained this in your book.
Um, the basic thing that people have to relearn or learn to do, and that I learned, was to change their thinking patterns. And by changing your thinking patterns, it actually changes your brain through something called neuroplasticity. They used to think that your brain was only changeable and malleable during certain periods in childhood. And now we know that your brain from birth to death changes based on input, based on your life experiences, based on your repetitive behaviors, even based on your repetitive thoughts. So, a lot of what we instinctually act upon are reactions, are we learn from our childhood experiences and they become wired in our brain. And you may learn those from your parents or caregivers or society or wherever, but you learn what you see. Well, as an adult, you can change that and you can rewire that with intentional interruption and by intentionally guiding your brain. And the easiest way to do that is mindfulness. And I wrote another book called How to Use Mindfulness as a Mental Health Tool. And it tells in there are a lot of different ways, excuse me, to practice mindfulness. And a lot of people equate it with meditation. Meditation is just one form of mindfulness, but visualization, affirmations, um, self talk may be challenging and redirecting your self talk. Even yoga and Tai Chi. And I've got a friend that says riding his motorcycle is mindful because any activity that brings you to the present moment and stops that chatter in your head is being mindful. It doesn't necessarily mean sitting on a cushion and meditating, Mindfulness just means bringing your mind back to the present moment and not ruminating about painful things from the past or worrying about things that make you anxious in the future. It means coming into the present. And every time you notice that you're out of the present and that you're thinking about the past or the future or somewhere else, and you bring your mind back to the present, you're actually changing the part of your brain that's in control. And that is causing neuroplastic change. And the way neuroplasticity works is it works through repetition, regular repetition, and um, over time. So if you practice mindfulness through affirmations or visualization or meditation or yoga or whatever on a daily, regular basis, your mind will change. Your brain will actually change its default form of functioning. And they've done studies that have shown, multiple studies that have proven that in as little as 8 weeks of practicing mindfulness meditation, that your brain rewires itself. And what happens is your amygdala calms down, which your amygdala is the part of your brain that is always scanning the environment, looking for
Mhm.
threats and fear. So that calms down, and your cognitive frontal lobe, the executive functioning higher brain, can assert more control over your actions and your behavior. And the easiest way to start doing that is just becoming aware of what you're thinking and stopping and pausing before you act or react, and ask yourself, okay, is this how I want to act? Is this really even what I believe? Or is this some holdover emotion I believe from my past that really doesn't work for me anymore? How do I want to behave? How do I
Mhm.
want to think? Who do I want to be?
Yes.
So, mindfulness is about changing your brain and changing your behavior, but it's really about making conscious decisions about who you want to be and the life you want to build, and not just reacting.
Yeah, that's a very good, thorough response. And of course, it's something that people have to practice daily. You know, it doesn't come easy, but as you said, it's something that you have to, again, using the word mindful of when you are reacting and what you can replace that with.
I found
And
the hardest part of it is at first is just remembering to be mindful.
oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think so too. And it just depends what stage of healing you are at. Of course,
Right,
when
right.
it's still raw, like in the beginning, it's harder to do that, but it's something with time and practice and reminders. Eventually, you hope to get to that state.
Like I said, eventually over time, your brain actually physically rewires itself, makes new connections so that mindfulness can become your default state. I had anxiety really bad in the past, and I'll always probably be wired to be anxious. But mindfulness lets me calm that and lets me pause and not do something and act in a way that I that reflects who I don't want to be. For me, I guarantee you, trying to end my life was a reaction from anxiety. It wasn't from depression. I mean, even though I was probably depressed, it was an anxious reaction for me because I was terrified of the future.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense about it. And to continue with your book, and you have a chapter called Look for the good and you will find it. You encourage people to seek out positive aspects even in difficult times, and that in itself is difficult. So when someone is overwhelmed by depression and struggling to see anything good, how can they begin to shift that mindset? So things are very heavy. And so instead of them feeling like, oh, you know what, I'm drowning, I don't see any glimmer of hope. What's something that they can do?
Well, Tanya, it comes down to being a conscious decision. And that's the only effort the person really has to make, first of all, is to make the conscious decision to help yourself instead of continuing to hurt yourself. If somebody is depressed or in that anxiety thought loop or in a bad state, what has to happen is they have to interrupt the process, because if they continue, they're just encouraging the same, more of the same in their brain and in their body. So the first step is simply just to make a decision that I'm going to help myself. And then there are several ways that you can help yourself. It might be as simple as taking a bath, getting out in the sunshine and taking a walk, calling a friend, petting a pet. But then when you've made small steps and you feel more capable of doing more, you can move on to things like, excuse me, like practicing gratitude and maybe thinking of finding. And at first it takes an effort to look in your current environment and find three things to be thankful for. As simple, it can be as simple as you turned a switch and lights came on, or you have money in the bank, or you have electricity and is you're not out in the cold, or simple things like that. Because our brains do what we call habituation,
Mhm.
and your brain habituates and completely overlooks the good in our lives because we get used to it. It becomes a habit. You don't notice all the things go right, but your brain certainly notices the things that go wrong, because that's your brain's first priority is your safety and keeping you alive. So it remembers and focuses on the things that went bad, which causes us to miss a lot of the good in the world and in our lives. I know I was guilty of this. In my first marriage, I totally focused on what I thought was wrong. And it amazed me that when I look back with through different eyes, through learning this stuff, I see there was a lot of right too. But I completely missed it because I was so busy and so focused on what I thought was wrong and what I thought my life should look like. So it's as simple as finding three things in your current environment that you can be thankful for. And then at night, um, looking back on your day and thinking of three things that were good that happened. It can be as simple as a flower blooming outside the door in the backyard, or a nice comment you got from a friend on Facebook. I mean, it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be huge life-changing things. And then you just keep making decisions to help yourself. Maybe find a therapist, maybe um g- make a date with a friend to do something. Socialization is great for your brain and your mental health. Um, Maybe it's exercising. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just little steps, little actions, but they add up and they compound. One little thing can start neurochemicals in your brain that are happier and make you feel better and maybe have a little more motivation to do the next thing. and then you do the next thing, and it just compounds. And
Mhm.
that's why I say mental health for me, I believe mental health is lifestyle. Is it's not something I think that we're all naturally taught or modeled growing up. I know it wasn't modeled for me. And I don't think it is for many people. I mean, I hope I've modeled a little bit better for my children since I've learned, but I modeled the wrong things for them at first. So we learn the environment we grow up in, and that shapes our brain until we make the decision to do some things different.
Yes, and I like your approach to gratitude because it's something we've heard over and over again. And some people think it has to be something grand, it has to be something big because they're in that state of lack. This happened to me, this is wrong, this bad event happened to me, I'm doomed, this,
They're
that.
still focusing on all that's bad.
Yes, and they're forgetting to look at there's something simple in front of you you are able to do or you're able to have. And you're overlooking that because you're looking at things that are bigger that you're missing or you're lacking. So that's a good point that you make. And I like the point you made about you were concerned with the shoulds of life. And you have a chapter about that. You know, it seems like a lot of women, they feel like immense pressure from societal shoulds. And that's something you went through, whether it's career success, having children, achieving certain milestones. And how do you suggest breaking free from these expectations of women and embracing a more personal, authentic path? Especially when people are different and they have different, interests, personalities. So without feeling like inadequate, what would you suggest about that? The shoulds.
Well, I was the worst person for trying to live by shoulds.
Mhm,
I mean, I thought it had to look a certain way, be a certain way. My house had to be this clean. It had to look like it came out of a magazine. And in a way, I mean, I'm not blaming him, but my ex husband kind of encouraged that. I mean, those were standards that he and I both agreed upon. And
mhm,
I nearly, I made myself miserable trying to live up to all the shoulds. And after the brain injury, I mean, I was as far from my ideal should as I'd ever been in my life. I mean, I couldn't even style my hair. I couldn't speak. My hands had a constant tremor. My kids had been taken away.
mhm.
I mean, trying to live up to the shoulds is exhausting and it's a recipe to make you miserable. So when after the brain injury, I I learned to accept myself because I learned that if I couldn't be kind to myself and forgiving of myself, how could I expect others to? And I learned, like for instance, my youngest son even came home. They used to come for visits when they lived out of state. Their dad would send them for visits. And I remember one time he came home and he said, "Mom, the toilet has a big black ring in it." Because
Mhm.
I mean, he was used to me having the house spotless, and he came home and the toilet had a ring in it, and he wasn't
Huh,
used to that. So
yeah.
he had to get used to the new standards too. But what I found is those expectations were ones that I was putting on myself. And even though my husband, ex husband, encouraged them, I accepted it. And
Mhm.
we all have the power to make the decisions for ourselves.
Absolutely.
What should is subjective. It
Mhm.
really is. we get to decide what should be for us. And if we let others impose those standards and restrictions on us, that too is a decision. So, what I realized is that it was up to me to decide what was okay. And from I don't have black rings in my toilet anymore,
Oh,
but
yeah.
from that point on, I relaxed the standards, and my house is not as clean as it was, and I don't have to look a certain way anymore. And guess what? The world doesn't stop. The world continues, even if I
Mhm,
don't adhere to those standards. And society is really, really bad about
mhm.
placing those on us women. And
Yes.
again, just being mindful and
Mhm,
realizing, is this something I believe and something I really feel strongly that I want to adhere to? And if it is, then yes, by all means. But a lot of times they're just holdovers
mhm.
from our parents or ex partners or some advertisement. And maybe it's not even right for us anymore.
No, absolutely. It does come from somewhere. It could come from your upbringing, from your parents, expectations, or as you said, a spouse, or from society. But is it really you? Is that
Right.
really something you want? Does it really fit
Right.
into your mold? Is it just because, you want to be similar to your friends or because your family said, no, this is how it should be and this is what you should. So it's
Right.
good to become to a place like you to have that freedom of like, I'm free from that and I can make the decisions based on what I want, what I need, and what I want. And so that's good that
And I'll
you are
tell
at
you
that
what, Tanya,
place.
I didn't even realize who I was and what my own standards were until I was divorced and lived by myself for a while because I married my high school sweetheart. And I never really had the period of where I lived alone and kind of came into my own and matured. So I did after the brain injury and after we got divorced. But living alone and being able to decide those things for yourself is a large part of growing up, and a large part of learning to like ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of need that space separate from the chatter from out there to kind of go in here
Right.
of what you want and what you want to do. And also just getting back to, let's see, if well, I know you've had this deeper sense of life ever since your incident of the coma. But now I'm not sure how you feel like spiritually, but going through a coma and your parents helping you heal, did you connect to like a different realm, state, or kind of a spiritual difference? I'm just curious about if that impacted you or not.
I would say at first I was severely mentally impaired. So my cognitive load, my higher functioning was decreased and diminished. So it was very interesting. There's a book called My Stroke of Insight, and I can't remember who wrote it, but
Oh, I've heard of it, but I can't remember either. Okay.
she's a neuroscientist who had a stroke, and the stroke caused the same that the like thinking parts, analytical, all the reasoning parts of her brain to shut down. And she experienced the same thing. It was kind of a nirvana
Mhm.
because all that chatter in my head, all that thinking brain was shut down and it was quiet. So all I all I could do was live in the here and now because my brain was not capable of rehashing the past or thinking of future. All I could do was exist in the now. So, in a way, it taught me mindfulness, and it taught me that, in a way, we're all doing this to ourselves. We're making ourselves kind of, if we're unhappy and anxious and miserable, a lot of it is what we're doing with to ourselves with our own brains and our own thoughts. So it actually was, there are times now when I kind of miss it because it was
Mhm,
so simple and so, I don't want to say happy because
mhm.
I mean, I was aware that my children had been taken away and I was very upset about my circumstances that I couldn't speak and all that. But in a way, it also was very calming and peaceful because I didn't have all that going. When all that started coming back,
Mhm. Oh no, your
it's
left lane, the
challenge.
critical, analytical,
Right.
logical.
So the challenge has been since then to kind of revisit and be able to maintain that calm peacefulness. And I do better some days than others.
And that's what you were talking about before about the mindfulness and meditation. When you're in that meditation, you hope to get into that state, even though it's not easy, but you hope to get that same peaceful effect that you did, as you said, you when you were in a coma.
Sure, but what I look at meditation as is a mental health tool. And too many people think you're just supposed to sit down and find this bliss. But what it actually is doing is it's a time for you to learn to train your brain and train your mind. So when the mind wanders, you come back. When the mind wanders, you come back to your breath, to the back of your eyes, to a mantra, whatever. It's active. My meditation is active. It's actively training your brain. And after you've done it for long enough, yeah, then maybe you can sit down and your mind can kind of go there. But at first, meditation is anything but peaceful. Matter of fact, it can
Yes,
stir
I
things,
agree.
it can stir things up that you didn't even know you're still upset about. But
Yes.
it's a really good tool to learn your own mind and learn how to work with and direct your mind.
Yeah, that's why I say meditation is when I go to sleep. That's my medic because it's true. Because when you find those moments like, "Hey, I'm just gonna sit still, maybe just stare at something or listen to quiet music," and depending on where you are in your healing, that noise can erupt and you can get
Oh
emotional
yeah.
and it's just too much. I can't. But I think with time, there is a time you can kind of just be at peace and calm yourself. That's why I
I
always
don't
say sleeping is my meditation.
I don't usually um find meditate I meditate daily still. And it's been God 13, 15 years. I
Oh,
mean,
that's amazing. Do
well,
you mean actually like sitting down listening to soft music and I
it's
don't know
just
if you
part of
use
my
any other tools,
it's
essential oils.
it's just part of my getting up in the mornings. I mean, is and it sets my mind and centers me for the day. But my meditation, I mean, I do listen to music and I practice slow breathing or box breathing and just kind of observe what my mind is doing and bring it back, observe it, bring it back. And then I have a series of affirmations that I run through and say. And I also send energy and love and light or whatever I need to certain people in my life. I mean, it's just a way for me to start the day and be grounded and get in touch with my brain and my mind and be conscious and aware rather than just kind of letting my mind and my brain go wherever it wants.
No, I mean
Right.
that's a very good, healthy way to start the day.
Well, I tried that.
Other, except, that's a better than, reaching for your phone, checking the daily headlines or saying like, oh my gosh, and you're getting stressed out. Like that's the worst thing you can do in the start of the day. I remember when I would do that at the start of my day checking headlines, I would start off more stressed out. So you're good. And then I had to train myself, do not look at the headlines for 2 to 3 hours. Like, like read a book a little bit. So I like
Very
how
big.
you have like first thing you mean when you wake up
Well, no,
or after breakfast.
I have 6 cats. So I have to feed the cats first thing when I get up.
Yes.
And then I make coffee. But the very next thing is sitting on the couch and going through my meditation, affirmations, and breathing exercise. And I don't even allow myself to look at my phone until after all that. Because think about it, if you look at your phone, and there have been so many studies showing this, it's going to hijack you.
Oh yeah.
It's going to hijack your brain, and
That's true.
you're gonna think about what it's doing, or what the headline said, or who sent you the email, or whatever. I mean, learning to use, I think computers and phones are very, very helpful. Don't get me wrong, but we need to use them mindfully, just like we manage our emotions. I mean, they're tools for us to use, not for them to use us.
Yes. Yes. And so, Debbie, I'm just wondering what advice would you give to someone who is currently struggling with suicidal ideation since you've went through that? And other than therapy, obviously the most logical is hopefully they can reach out to a therapist, psychiatrist, call 91988 for a crisis line. And what recommendation would you give them for suicidal ideation, severe depression, and feeling overwhelmed by their emotions? I know you've shared that a little bit, but what's other suggestions would you have?
Well, the first step I would say is extend yourself some kindness and show yourself the same compassion and forgiveness that you would anybody else. I did not do that, or did not even learn to do that until after my attempt to end my life. I was always the biggest bleeding heart around. I mean, I was a very compassionate person, but I never included myself in that compassion. And the world gets to be a much nicer place when you start being kind and loving to yourself. And like I said before, how can you expect anybody else to if you don't treat yourself that way?
Yes.
So I would say the first step is give yourself a break. Quit expecting you to be this way, or you should do that or this. And then, I mean, first thing is give yourself a break. Second thing is make a decision. Make a decision to help yourself. It really boils down to a conscious decision. Am I going to keep hurting myself, or am I going to help myself? And helping yourself may look like reaching out to a friend, to a parent, to a therapist, or maybe just not going through with whatever you were planning and realizing this is for now, not forever. Life is not always going to be this way. And give yourself a chance, because suicide is final. If it ends whatever's going to happen, but if you give yourself a chance, it's not always going to be this way. Just keep going and do little bitty things every day to help yourself. Because if you continue to hurt yourself, it does get worse.
Absolutely. That's good advice. And as you said, because that can tend to happen with the person that's always the caregiver, the helper, the one who's helping others or doing things for others. as you said, you mentioned in your life, then you're like, well, how about me? I need to start taking care of myself. I'm meeting other people's needs, their expectations, being there for them, helping them. And as you've mentioned, now is the time for me to show some compassion, grace, and understanding about you, which is good. Don't
I grew
get lost.
I grew
Don't
up
lose yourself while you're doing other things.
I grew up with narcissistic parents. And the flip side of having a narcissistic parent, the child either becomes a narcissist or they become a codependent. And I was a codependent, which means I put everybody before myself. And I found my value through them being needed by them. So I actually took care of a brother for 2 years that died of AIDS. And I mean, when I tried to in my life, I had taken care of two infant. At the time, I was taking care of my brother. I also had an infant son, so I would travel with my infant son in the car and stay with my brother for a month at a time with my baby in the crib. And I felt like Gumby with
Oh my goodness. That
with
was challenging.
oh being a caregiver for a sick person. I mean, as many people know, it is so stressful.
Oh, absolutely. I've been
And
there. So I know what you mean. I've definitely been there. And yeah, it does have the stresses and the demands, and you were doing it at the same time with caring for your child.
and
So that's heavy in
growing up
itself.
with a narcissistic parent, I married a narcissist,
Okay, that
and
makes
they
sense.
you typically do that if you're a codependent. And so I never learned how to take care of myself. And I learned how to take care of others really well. And I saw being selfish as a bad thing. I mean, I used to think I never want to be anything like the narcissist in my life. But what I realized, and I think it's the Buddha that calls it being wise, selfish, you have to be a little bit selfish to take care of yourself, to fill up your cup, to meet your own needs before you can give to anybody else. Because I used to give out of a state of lack. So I would get very angry inside and passive aggressive because I never got anything back. And I just gave and gave and gave until I was exhausted and miserable and depleted. And that's somewhat how I got to the state where I thought ending my life was a better option. But learning to do differently, I think it's really about learning to take care of yourself and your own mental health. It's about your relationship with yourself. And self care is the basis of mental health care.
Yes, I mean, that's a whole topic in itself. You know, you've heard of narcissistic abuse, like people living with narcissistic people. And that's just like you can have a whole topic about that. So I can understand how that impacted your decisions in your life also. And just to think about, I'm just trying to think, when did you, well, before your coma, because you had going through anxiety and depression, did you see a therapist or did you start seeing one after your experience? I'm just wondering, because some people they
I,
don't reach out for therapy.
I had seen many, many therapists before my attempted it in my life, and was on antidepressants. And as a matter of fact, when I tried in my life, a psychiatrist had just prescribed another antidepressant on top of the one I had. And I
Ooh,
was like
that's serious.
a
Yeah.
week or two into taking it. And so I'm not blaming her, I'm blaming myself. I mean, I didn't educate myself. Suicidal ideation is very common when
Yes.
on antidepressants. I mean, these things are, I'm not against them,
Hmm.
and they certainly serve a purpose, but
Yes.
they were never meant to be long term, and they were never meant to be one on top of the other.
No,
But
absolutely not.
I was of the mind that I was looking for a quick fix, and I was looking for someone else to fix me and make me okay. And nobody can do that but yourself. And the therapists that I had before the brain injury were good, but I probably didn't use them correctly because I was still of the mindset where I wasn't completely honest or authentic, and I was trying to, I don't know, project like who I thought I was supposed to be rather than maybe the real me, the real ugly truths. So after the brain injury, I found a really good therapist that practiced cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT,
Yes.
which is a form of mindfulness therapy, um, which has been proven to actually change your physical brain over time
Hmm.
because you change your behaviors and you change your way of reacting. And at the time, I was reading a lot of spiritual books like Pema Chodron, Rick Hansen, a lot of like Buddhism, and she had read all those same books. And all I can say is, you know, the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will come. She was,
Yes.
she was the right teacher for me at the right time.
Okay. Oh, good.
Makes
Good.
me sad when she told me I graduated, I didn't need to come back anymore. I would love to still talk to her sometimes just about things.
Well, hopefully, yeah, you can reconnect because it does seem like she's helped you a lot.
She retired.
Okay. Well, oh, I can find somebody that's similar.
I actually ran into her one time. I was taking care of my mother's house while she was traveling, and I just decided to go for a walk in the neighborhood, and I ran into her.
Oh gosh, that's amazing. It's just good to have that change maker, somebody that really made a difference in your life when you have gone through this. And there are therapists out there that are like that. It just people have to search for them. And
Well, and it's always good just to have somebody to bounce ideas off of and to get a different perspective and somebody's perspective that you respect and that you admire and that you would like to model rather than a friend who is always in trouble themselves.
oh yes, because it's hard for them to listen to you when they're just so concerned with their own problems and
Well,
they're not
and
going to be good listeners.
do you really want to take their advice?
Yeah, yeah, or to even take their advice. It might not be the best advice at all times.
Right.
But Debbie, I just wanted to thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing your personal story with listeners. And can you please share the title of your book again and your website?
Well, I've got actually three
Oh,
books.
3 books, yes.
And one is called Beat Depression and Anxiety by Changing Your Brain. And that's kind of a very short how to, very concrete tips that you can implement on a daily basis to start changing your thinking patterns, which does neuroplastically change your brain. And then I have another book, which is my memoir called Sex, Suicide, and Serotonin.
Interesting name, title.
And it basically tells how I got to the place in my life that I thought ending my life was the answer, and then how I recovered spiritually, physically, mentally from the brain injury. So the last part is kind of the self-help book in disguise. But if
Mhm.
you go read the reviews on Amazon, I mean, people say it's life changing because it tells all the things I learned and how I learned to do differently. And the last book I just published in November is How to use mindfulness as a mental health tool. And it's 323 pages of the current evidence for mindfulness changing your brain as a mental health tool. So, and there's even one chapter in there that says mindfulness, well, it's about what mindfulness is not. And the chapter says it's not spiritual, it's not sitting on a cushion. So, it's very practical steps that anybody can take to start practicing mindfulness as a way to start directing, guiding, and changing their brain and their behaviors.
Okay, and also your website. What is your
My
website?
website is thebestbrainpossible.com, thebestbrainpossible.com. And I've got over 400 articles on mindfulness, brain health, mental health, exercise, depression, and a lot at the very first about how to recover from a brain injury.
Okay, Debbie, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being a change maker in the mental health sector. I really appreciate it, and thank you again.
Well, thank you, Tanya. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope your listeners have too.
Yes, thank you.